hope to accomplish tonight is to give everyone like a high-level view of the Rhode Island Housing and Maintenance Code, which is formally known as the Property Maintenance Code and was adopted as part of the code collection from the model codes. I'll provide an overview and then at the end hopefully make some recommendations to this commission as to how I think we could maybe promulgate some rules and regs that may assist in the landlord-tenant arena. I will not bore you too much with general law. How do I get this on the big screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So when the codes were first introduced, prior to that point, the codes were handled in the municipalities. When they went to a model code or a state code, the law said that they would take that housing and maintenance code out of all the municipalities and leave it up to the state to adopt one code. There was a small problem in that process because we didn't repeal the housing and maintenance code, so it still stayed in force along with the code we adopted as the property maintenance code. So there is some overlap, but it's not in one text entirely. So in the property maintenance code, it says the provisions of that particular code shall apply to existing residential, non-residential structures, and it will constitute minimum requirements and standards for the equipment, facilities like ventilation, space, heat, and everything you would expect when you're living in a residential dwelling.
Any dwelling can be or rented dwelling?
Well, that's a good question. The property maintenance code basically has two components. It doesn't deal specifically with rental units, single family, so you will have a single family and you're letting your grass grow too long. That's in the property maintenance. Also addresses violations or potential violations with unsuitable living conditions, and that could cover whoever is residing in the dwelling. The other important point is there are zoning ordinances that I'll say run in tandem or can provide another way for property maintenance codes to be addressed, because the property maintenance code allows for an appeals process. That is a very specific process that doesn't afford you to, the opportunity to get something remedied quickly. You have to send a notice out to the owner. He has 10 days to respond. Then he has 10 days to appeal, and then it would go to an appeals panel that meets once a month. So there is no quick resolution to potentially unsanitary, or I don't want to say unsafe conditions, but a no heat situation, or maybe no hot water situation that the local inspector may not deem to be an emergency situation. Okay. So, in this past legislative session, there was a bill introduced that created the Office of the Commissioner within the State Building Office. And it's a great opportunity to be speaking to you today, because that new creation of that office may allow us to expand that particular component to handle these kinds of issues. Okay, so right now, the Office of the Commissioner is responsible for code adoption, certification of building officials and inspectors, and uniform code enforcement throughout the state. And that, I think, is the code adoption and the uniform enforcement piece is where these types of landlord-tenant complaints get lost, because they're handled differently everywhere, okay? The Office of the Commissioner right now also oversees what we refer to as the e-permitting initiative. But there was prior legislation that says we want to get the state building office and all the municipalities on a web-based platform for permitting, plan review, and inspection. That could also now incorporate tenant complaints and enforcement, which isn't part of that as of now. So we're looking at including zoning, planning, maybe some DEM, coastal resources, and this opens the door for the possibility of creating a centralized complaint portal through that same OpenGov e-permitting system. I'm kind of jumping ahead. I'm not following the slides, but I don't want to bore you with too much code stuff. So if we took that model and we created a system very similar to the way we handle contractor registrations and contractor complaints, we would set up the OpenGov portal to accept a tenant complaint. Prior to sending those out to the municipalities, we could have a triage unit. And you determine, is this an emergency that needs to be dealt with within 24 hours? Is it a valid complaint? Is it something that we should let the landlord have 10 days for, 20 days for, and we proceed accordingly? Those complaints could then be sent to the local jurisdictions to follow up and see that it's resolved. The nice thing about OpenGov is you'd be allowed to follow the workflow and you'd be allowed to keep track of landlord compliance, tenant complaints, how many complaints you're getting, how many complaints are not necessary or warranted, do not fall under the property maintenance code. Maybe they need to be sent to another state agency. So that portal would create that uniform repository for that initial triage and then the sending them out to the municipalities, okay? You could see the real-time tracking. You'd be able to communicate. Again, the beauty of OpenGov, our e-permitting system is you can communicate right in the portal and everyone sees it. So the building official can communicate with the landlord or the tenant and we can track the resolution. Okay, we talked a little about the triaging component. I think that's probably very important. I don't like the idea, in the current system under the property maintenance code, you get a complaint, you send out a letter, a violation letter. So this would afford the opportunity to review them, recognize if they're valid complaints, and if they are, to what extent the response time needs to be, okay? Another thing we talk about developing in the Office of the Commissioner is training for building officials, the construction industry, and this also now lends us the opportunity to maybe do some tenant education and provide resources. Again, it would be that one-stop web-based site where they could see what are their tenant rights. How do they report a code violation? Is their complaint worthy of even submitting to us? They may not know how to report a violation. So just that, we found it very useful for the Contractors Registration Board to have that FAQ site. And I think it would be not only for tenants, we also thought we'd expand it to landlords, some FAQs, links to your legal requirements, best practices. Again, this is kind of like just a high level, here's what I'd like to accomplish, here's how I think we could help this moving forward. I think it would benefit everyone if it was put in the portal and it was sent to one review agency and then disseminated out. I can tell you in the property maintenance code, they're handled differently in every municipality. Some do the zoning route, some do minimum housing. They have housing courts, some have municipal courts. And as the executive secretary to the building board, I can tell you I have never received in the past 6 years an appeal to the property maintenance code, which means A, they're not being afforded the appeal option, or B, no one knows it's an option. So I think we have the ability to educate, provide the resources, and provide that one-stop, easy registry if that were decided on for landlords in the complaint component. That is about it. I'd be more than happy to answer questions about that particular workflow or those recommendations.